Today, we're diving into one of the biggest seismic shifts in the history of economic thought. Yep, we're talking about John Maynard Keynes and how his totally radical ideas about the future, well, they completely remade the world of economics. Let's get right into it. So, let me ask you this. Is the economy a perfect machine? One that just corrects itself? For a really long time, the answer from mainstream economists was, believe it or not, basically yes. The whole idea was that if you just left it alone, the economy would always find its way back to full employment. But then, of course, the Great Depression hit, and that nice, tidy theory started to look pretty shaky.
And this is exactly where Keynes storms onto the scene, with devastating critiques just like this one. He's basically saying that the old guard, the so-called orthodox theory, was built on a foundation of sand. Why? Because it completely ignored the single most important fact of our economic lives. We don't know what's coming next.
Okay, so to really grasp Keynes's revolution, we have to understand what he was fighting against. Let's take a look at this pretty polite theory that he was so determined to tear down. You see, the absolute core of the classical model was this idea of long-period equilibrium. They pictured the economy as this super stable system, kind of like a pendulum. If it gets knocked off course, it'll just naturally swing back to its center point. And that center point was always full employment and maximum output. It was neat, it was clean, but Keynes was about to argue it was just fundamentally wrong. I mean, just try to imagine an economic model that assumed we knew exactly what resources we had, that we could predict the future with absolute certainty, and that any risk could be calculated down to the last decimal point. Sounds a bit like a fantasy world, right? Well, this was the house of cards that classical economics was built on. And this brings us to Keynes's main weapon, his battering ram, really, the simple, undeniable fact of uncertainty. He argued that the classical economists had completely, fundamentally misunderstood the very nature of the future. This slide lays out the key difference perfectly. On one hand, you have risk. That's calculable. You know the odds on a roulette wheel. But uncertainty? Whoa, that's a whole different beast. As Keynes put it, there's just no scientific basis on which to form any calculable probability whatever. You can't calculate the odds of a war, or figure out what interest rates will be in 20 years, or predict the next invention that changes everything. You just don't know. So here's the knockout punch. If the entire point of investing and building wealth is to get results in a distant, uncertain future, how on earth can you use economic models that assume the future is knowable? You can't. It's that simple. The old methods were just the wrong tools for the job. Now, this idea of profound uncertainty doesn't just shatter old models. It actually changes how we behave with our own money. And this brings us to one of Keynes's most revolutionary ideas about why we all hold on to cash. Keynes poses this fantastic, almost provocative question. I mean, think about it. In a world of perfect certainty, holding on to cash that earns you zero interest is, frankly, irrational. Every other asset out there gives you some kind of return, so why do we do it? Why do perfectly rational people hoard cash that does nothing? And here's his profound answer. Holding cash isn't really about making a smart investment. It's about fear. It's a security blanket. When we are deeply anxious and distrustful about that unknowable future, our desire to hold liquid cash, what he famously called liquidity preference, it just skyrockets. It lulls our disquietude. It makes us feel safe. And this idea completely reframes the entire theory of interest rates. For Keynes, the interest rate isn't just about the supply and demand for loans. No. The rate of interest is the price of security. It's the premium someone has to pay you to convince you to give up the safety and comfort of your cash and take a scary leap into that uncertain future by making an investment. So if uncertainty is driving all our decisions about saving and investing, what does that mean for the economy as a whole? Well, this leads to another one of Keynes's huge innovations, a theory for total demand. It's kind of amazing when you think about it, but Keynes pointed out this massive blind spot. Classical theory had no real theory for the demand of everything we produce as a whole. They just sort of assumed that if you build it, someone will buy it. Keynes comes along and says, not so fast. He defines this thing called effective demand as the sum of what all of us spend on consumption plus what businesses spend on investment. And of those two things, investment is the total wild card. And why is that? Well, because it's all about guessing the future. It's driven by what Keynes famously called our animal spirits, our confidence, our gut feelings, our optimism, or our pessimism. And because our view of the future is built on such a, in his words, flimsy foundation, investment can just swing wildly and suddenly.
And here is the big punchline. When fear and pessimism take over, businesses stop investing. Investment collapses. That causes total demand in the economy to just plummet. Businesses lay people off. And here's the key part. Unlike what the classical model predicted, there's absolutely nothing to guarantee the economy will just bounce back. It can actually get stuck in a rut of high unemployment for a long, long time.
So, let's just pull all of this together. Keynes himself pointed out that his work really represented two major definitive breaks with the past. First, he said the whole orthodox theory was built on a complete fantasy, this idea that the future is knowable, and because of that, they got the theory of interest rates totally wrong. And second, by completely ignoring the need for a theory of total demand, they were basically just relying on that old, tired idea that supply creates its own demand, which the Great Depression had shown to be devastatingly false. And so we're left with Keynes's powerful, lingering question. His revolution really was to force economics to stare reality in the face, the messy, unpredictable, and deeply human reality of an uncertain world. It forces us to ask, even today, how much should we trust our polite techniques and our neat models when the future is anything but?